Did you know something new is invented every 10 minutes? Join us as we speak to the innovators reinventing our world here on planet Earth and far, far beyond. Welcome to GTWN Now, a podcast brought to you by the Global Telecom Women's Network and sponsored by CMS Global. GTWN Now introduces the movers and the makers at the cutting edge of technology who are committed to keeping us all connected. In each episode, we invite a leading expert to share her experience building life-changing inventions in places and spaces that don't yet exist, and the inspiration they must muster to tackle the impossible. We also ask our guests to share tips, tools, and strategies to reach your own moonshot. I'm your host, Rosali Gitau, founder of Bixi FinTech for Women and Global Telecom Women's Network International Board member. Welcome to GTWN Now. Hello. On today's episode, I get to speak with Lucy Lombardi. Lucy has over 2 decades of distinguished professional experience in the telecom industry. She's held leadership roles across a range of departments, including technology, operations, marketing, strategy, and innovation. And after a long and illustrious career at TIM, Italy's leading telecom infrastructure company, Lucy is currently a VP at FiberCop, a telecom infrastructure leader. Lucy has also served as a chairwoman of several initiatives at the GSMA. So we're so happy that she has decided to join us on the GTWN Now podcast. So Lucy, welcome to the show.
Well, hi, Rosalia, and thank you for having me here. It's really thrilling for me to be here and talking about what I'm passionate about. It's, let's say, from hype to impact. So I'm a very pragmatic innovation let's say, observer, and I'd like to talk about this.
I really, prior to when we were discussing the theme of your particular podcast, I was really interested in how you framed it, separating the hype from what is real. We recently came back from the GSMA, and a lot of people had a lot of observations about how it's changed and evolves over the years. And it seemed like quite a lot of the hype was focused on AI, but also its kind of robotics component. So I'm really excited to have your perspective. It's It's the bird's eye view of what was happening, because when you're there, you're really getting into the hype. I saw, robotic dogs jumping around. It's really exciting. But then, like you said, the pragmatic, how is a jumping robotic dog going to improve my life?
Absolutely. I'm fully aligned with that observation. Yeah, Mobile World Congress was a really big event, an interesting event. And let's say the topics that were on everybody's mouth were AI and satellites. Those were the 2 big main themes that everybody was talking about. I mean, wherever you look, you see people talking about AI. You have Price Waterhouse Cooper releasing global artificial intelligence studies where it's predicted that AI will add something like 15 trillion to the global economy by 2030. That's only 5 years from now. McKinsey reports on satellites that will add another trillion to the economy by 2023. So 2035, sorry, I got that wrong. You have this really big hype around AI and the satellite industry. But what hit me the most at the Mobile World Congress is I participated in a panel with about 20 leaders of the industry. And the topic of the panel was empowering and driving business model transformation through AI. And everybody was talking about, yes, AI, we're doing AI, we're doing AI, we're doing AI. But it hit me, what does that actually mean to do AI? What are you actually doing when you say, I'm doing AI? And this is, I think, where people sort of get lost in the big slogan and the big hype of AI, and translating it into action is something a little bit different.
So, I mean, I natural follow-up. What does it mean to integrate AI? I couldn't agree more. Everybody's AI, and frankly, so I run a startup. If we don't say the word AI, no one's interested. That being said, full disclosure, we actually did use AI from the outset. It's one of the software integrations that we had way before the hype started. But, you know, how does, and I'm particularly interested in legacy businesses. It's easy for a new startup, we're building on top of new layers, but what does becoming an AI business look like for a legacy corporate
Well,
concretely?
it's concretely, yes, it's the concretely that really thrills me. When I look at the AI or innovation in general, I led innovation for several years, but when I looked at innovation, I always tried to ask myself one or two questions. Well, first of all, I tried to understand what the technology was behind the slogans. And then I tried to ask these two questions. So what problems can this technology solve, help solve? And or what opportunities can it create? So AI is not is a big umbrella word, but it doesn't really mean anything in itself because it has very many different subcategories of AI. If you think of, for instance, machine or deep learning, these are algorithms or let's say applications that are used to crunch massive amounts of data, so to create more actionable insights. So these massive amounts of data can be actually trained by humans in order to identify patterns, and that's when you have supervised training. But they can also be let alone to identify themselves what the patterns are in this massive amount of data, and there you have unsupervised training. Now, if you think of the human brains, at every given moment, we take in something around 11 million pieces of information, but we're able to process only 40 of these consciously. So we discard a lot of information that we actually absorb in every given moment. Well, machines are much more flexible in this. So AI in this machine and deep learning features are able to crunch this massive amount of data and provide insights. And this is one area of AI. Another one, which is completely different because it addresses different kind of use cases, is, for instance, natural language processing. This, we've all seen this in chatbots or in virtual assistants, for instance, and this addresses a very different kind of use cases than the one previous one I saw. But we also can think of generative AI. Generative AI is a feature of AI which basically learns from what has, let's say, been done, and is able to produce images, videos, or other forms of data. So we've seen AI producing symphonies or producing paintings, for instance. So when you think of AI, I gave you three examples of three very different things, and they all go under the umbrella hat of AI. So what does it actually mean to do AI? Well, it's easy when you think of natural language processing because we've all touched these. We have the virtual assistants at home with some famous brands that everybody's talking about. But we've also all had experiences in maybe phoning the customer care of some major companies and having to talk to a chatbot, and the frustration of having to talk to a chatbot that doesn't understand maybe your question or is not compassionate in a way that we would expect it to be, being a human being. And also, let's say, maybe being Italian, somehow I don't get the satisfaction of getting mad at a chatbot. It gives me more satisfaction getting mad at a person when I need to get mad.
I couldn't agree more.
So, so when you think of the chatbots, maybe you have to also think of what the business case is behind these chatbots. are. So it might not be, and this leads me back to digital humanism, which was the major theme of the mobile century. It might not be in providing a better customer care service to your customers, but it might be in cost efficiency, for instance. So you really have to think of what the applications are, what the technology is, so understanding the different technology features, where they can apply and why you would be applying them. For instance, in the telecommunication world, which is the one I know the best, it's the applications for AI and for crunching this massive amount of data are several. So you can have predictive maintenance, you can have self-optimizing networks, robotics process automation, but you can also use them in the fraud management, for instance, in identifying security patterns. So the opportunities are very wide and diversified around here. But again, you do have some challenges for adoption. Again, here it sort of hit me. When I was researching for this podcast, I fell upon the Cisco 2024 AI Readiness Index report, and in this index report, it basically interviews large companies, and it says that 13% seem to be ready to leverage on AI and AI-powered technologies, which might seem a big, small number, but I looked at the trend with respect to the previous year, and it's actually going down. So there's all this big hype in AI, but you see that companies feel less and less ready for AI. On the other hand, you see companies investing enormous budgets in IT budgets for AI, and it's expected to double in the coming years. But half of the companies that have actually invested in AI up to now say that their implementations have fallen short of the expectations across the top priorities. So there is still I think some actual work to be done to make this big hype that everybody's talking about and this big opportunity and to put it into practice, to make it become impactful, to put it integrated into the industry itself. I'll pause a second because
you said so many things, and I'm so interested. I actually have a follow-up question to that. Do you think that these implementation challenges are due to the technology itself, i.e., it's difficult to integrate, or the human factor? Because I have the impression I've worked at large organizations. You've obviously worked at large organizations. Every change management, it's never simple. Whether it's everyone has to adopt AI, or quite literally one of the organizations I work with had to kind of move its enormous infrastructure from like a DOS system to, modern software systems, right? Like it takes, even though we know it works, it's better, it takes time. There's the human component of change. And I think my impression is when it comes to AI, there's that additional human resistance, because AI is often spoken about, not necessarily true, but spoken about as a possible replacement for people, especially, kind of service or white collar workers. I wonder if that decline is a function of that. What are your thoughts on it? Obviously, this is speculative, but is the implementation challenge a human problem or a technology problem?
Well, I'm a very democratic person, so I would say a little bit of both. So A or B. But I think we have a number of problems, and that probably go also beyond this cultural and technology issue. If I think of, for instance, our experience adopting AI for predictive maintenance within our network management, we found ourselves at a certain point having to gather the data to train the algorithms. And in the trouble tickets that we actually were analyzing, how were they managed up until that moment? Our employees, my colleagues, got the trouble ticket, analyzed it, and then went to solve the issue, but never actually wrote down in the ticket how the issue was solved, because there was no need to do that. So once the issue is solved, we were happy. Now, if you position yourself today having to train algorithms, you get all these trouble tickets of the past 5 years, but you didn't record how you solved the problems. So this is an issue about data. So where I'm trying to lead is that, for instance, data is one of the big problems of AI when you start to think about the training the algorithms around it. So you need quality data, but you also need to think today about storing the data that maybe today you do not realize you need, but tomorrow you might need it. So you have to start thinking a little bit differently. And this, for me, is a very good example of something that's halfway between cultural and technological, because then when I start thinking of storing the data, I have to start thinking of it being safe, secure. Where do I store it? I don't have internal processes that allow me to store this massive amount of data. So, I mean, this segues into the governance. I need an internal governance of AI within large companies. And as you say, especially in the telecommunication industry, we have layers and layers and layers of infrastructure throughout the years. So there's the integration with legacy infrastructure that makes it somewhat a little bit more costly to implement new technologies around AI. But here again, there's something that, because everybody's talking also about the cultural aspect, and something I read in an interview, I don't remember by whom, but it hit me very much. It said, large companies that today are investing and were able to hire data scientists and maybe have a pool of data scientists are not actually using those data scientists for AI. So they're basically being used for traditional algorithm research. Why is this? If I think within my company, why is this? Because the people asking them the questions are the people from our commercial department, from our network department, and they are not trained in AI. So they're not trained to ask the AI question. So they will always ask the traditional questions. What amount of churn have I had in the past week? But they will not go beyond and say, I'm just giving some examples off the top of my head, but what amount of churn have I had in the past week, and how many of these have actually, I don't know, posted on Facebook to see if there's a correlation there, maybe. So the questions that are being asked in this pool of data scientists are traditional questions, so they're not actually used to develop new patterns or to research the data in an innovative way. And this was a very interesting interview I found around the cultural aspect that's hindering the deployment of AI within companies.
It's really interesting. You're obviously describing these, the implementation challenges, and it's a little bit of pile A and a little bit of, column B, but it's kind of reminding me a lot of first wave of big technological changes. So like first wave internet, first wave cryptocurrency. There's the early adopters and people are really excited because it is really exciting. It promises a world of change. But then when you kind of get into it, it's not like we're not able to have that natural evolution. And so there's a little bit of pullback, of look, it didn't work. It's too difficult to integrate. Let's move on to the next thing. But it's almost like there will be this slow progression in that direction. So we're not going to wake up tomorrow and everything's going to be AI. But now that we're learning what we don't know, the unknown unknowns, right? And so for the next handful of years, it's the unknown unknowns portion. And then maybe in 10 years, my daughters will wake up, in university, and that's the big transformation. But it started kind of 20 years prior. Does that make sense to you? Or do you think that is kind of where we are? Because part of the hype is it's upon us. It's happening. It's already happened. But as you rightfully point out, if most people's interaction with AI currently is a chatbot, and like, God help us all if it has arrived. So yeah, is that your impression, that we're in kind of the earlier waves, and this is more technology that's going to be the day-to-day for future generations, or is it upon us?
It's a really interesting question I have, and I think it's part of the answer I can see it also looking at how the ecosystem or the industry is actually moving. So a nice, let's say, indication is what the standards are actually doing. And you have all the standards. Why is this a good indication? Because the standard bodies define frameworks that will be applied in few years from now. So they're working on today what you will find on the market through vendors or deployments in a few years. And everybody is working on some form of AI. So you have, I don't know, ETSI, which is the Telecommunication European Institute. You have the TM Forum. You have ITU, which is the UN for Technology. You have the GSMA. Everybody is working on providing some, with respect to their specific remits, but some specific guidelines and to help AI deployments within companies. One of these, for instance, going back to my data example before, is providing a data framework. So how should data look? So when a telecommunication companies have different vendors, for instance, you have consistent data across the different vendors. This is just a concrete example. So you have the industry standard bodies are working on it, and this will happen throughout the next coming years. But on the other hand, there are a number of other players that are actually working on AI. And going back to your question, what lies ahead, I like to look at the trends, and everybody's talking about AI, as you say, AI, AI, AI. But if you really read the trends, what the major trends that I see ahead are around incremental innovation, or not around disrupted innovation. So what I mean by incremental innovation is new applications of AI. So, for instance, one innovation, new trends that they mention is giving a body to language, natural language machines. And this is basically the Android robotics. Another big trend is agentic AI, where you have AI agents that will actually autonomously think and act on behalf of humans. So these I see as incremental AIs. But what I find very interesting is that you also find trends that I would define as the side effects of AIs. So you see focus on energy efficient computing. Why is this focus on energy efficient computing? Because AI uses a lot of energy. So unless you make it more efficient, you will not scale up AI. You see focus on disinformation. We all know that that is one of the side effects of AI, and disinformation being one of the major trends going forward seems quite interesting to me. Another topic everybody's talking about is cybersecurity. That's another major trend. But if you think about it, it's another side effect of AI. It's a side effect of storing all the data, of having all the data, of being able to analyze all the data. So if you think of it, stepping back a little bit, going forward, these major trends are incremental AI on one side, and what I would categorize as the side effects of AI that you have to address in order to make AI actually implemented.
The cottage industries of AI, so to say, so to speak.
Exactly.
That's really interesting. You know, for anybody listening looking for their next business, don't dig the gold mine, sell the shovels, right?
Exactly. Well, now you have a lot of industry is working on this. You have policymakers. Of course, the EU came up with this Artificial Intelligence Act in June last year. You have UNESCO working on the AI partnership on ethics and governance. OECD has launched the OECD AI principles. You have even the G7 that launched a global partnership on AI in 2020. And this is just to name a few. So you have the whole industry that's trying to work around this. What I'm saying is between the technical standard body and maybe the policy moving and the trends that you see going forward, I think that we're all, as you say, we're not there yet. There's still much to be done, but I think the problems are being shared, and we are trying to address them going forward.
So now, kind of to solutions, you're sitting at the front lines of this. What is this pathway from hype to impact? So it's not a smooth path, clearly. Lots of, bumps, crevasses, a few detours, maybe, getting lost and circling back. But, you're a practitioner. What is your pathway moving forward to the end goal, which is, more transformative AI landscape, after all the incremental in the cottage industry? What does a pathway from hype to impact look like for you?
Well, when brainstorming on new topics, I always invite my team to approach a new topic in two big phases. The first phase being a divergent phase, where all the ideas, the concerns, the constraints, whatever is brought out and put on a whiteboard. No idea is discarded at that stage. Every idea is at par to the other ones. And this already was a challenging point because people criticize other people's ideas quite frequently. But anyway, so this was a big effort for me to create this divergent phase. And once we have this all on a whiteboard, I follow up with a convergent phase. So we start categorizing the ideas, prioritizing, seeing what's relevant, what's not relevant. And as you categorize and prioritize, slowly the path going forward comes out. Now, when I look at the wider industry and where we are today and how the ecosystem, so looking on one side on the big trends and on the other side, how the ecosystem is moving, so from the standards, policies, and everything, I believe we are probably at the end of the divergent phase. So problems are still coming up. We are still not certain how to address them because discussion is ongoing of how to move forward. But I think we're approaching the end of the divergent phase, and we will start a convergent phase going forward as to how AI needs to be addressed. Of course, in the path that we identify for AI, it will be fundamental that big companies, the industry, and so the public and the private actually work together in order to converge around this. I'm a strong believer in ecosystem innovation. Not one goes ahead and leads, especially when it comes to AI. But I also believe that it's not only a matter of big companies and policymakers, it's also a matter of individuals. Everybody talks about, okay, AI is in the hands of EU policy and regulators and big companies, but it's also in the hands of me as a mother of my children, of getting educated myself and educating my children of what the pitfalls can be of using AI. Now that we have AI in our phones doing everything from translating to managing photos to, I don't know, whatever, I think it's very important.
Writing the research papers.
Writing the research papers, how to use ChatGPT exactly, and all these things. So I think individual education is something not everybody talks about, but it's something that it will be increasingly important to take into the ecosystem, to consider into the wider ecosystem when we move forward in AI.
So that's really interesting because, we just talked about where are we in time and, in innovation, and you've put it so perfectly. We're at the end of the divergent phase and kind of moving towards the convergence phase. And I think that is such an interesting way for us to kind of think and ideate and maybe borrow some lessons learned from prior technological innovations, just to know where you are. And it's almost like it can sometimes help dictate what's the best thing to start building. Like, are you still layer one, or are you layer two, or are you, way past that? So that's a really perfect way to describe it. And I think I'm going to highlight that in the show notes because, and I'm probably going to borrow it. But don't worry, I'll attribute. So, with all that being said, one of the reasons why we're sitting and speaking today is because the Global Telecom Women's Network, of which you are a board member, has recently come out with its annual industry publication, The Mobile Century. We had on a prior episode the editor-in-chief for this year's publication to kind of give us an overview of her general impression to what the contributions were like this year. And I might have forced her into telling me who her favorite child was in terms of the best articles from this year's publication. I'm not gonna. I'll leave it hanging there to figure out. Tune in for that episode to figure out who her favorite child is. But one of the things that, is really interesting, the Mobile Century is a publication that's been around for over a decade. GTWN has been around before this century, so that's really interesting. And when I was kind of thinking around the Mobile Century, I thought to myself, oh my gosh, we're a quarter way through this century. I don't know if anyone has recognized that. I still feel like Y2K, like it just happened. It didn't just happen. We're a quarter way through. And I kind of want to use this as an opportunity to ask, you're sitting at the forefront at the crest of the divergent wave, entering the next phase of convergence. What do you think? We're a quarter way through the century. What do you see for the next quarter century? Where do you see us in the next 50 years? Like, what does that look like for all of us? Not only within the hype, but within the real thing. So whether it's AI, whether it's satellite, what does the next quarter century or 50 years look like for us and our kids?
Yeah.
It's good news.
Well, first of all, let me say that the Mobile Century, especially this last edition, was an amazing gathering of articles from amazing women, because there was everything about AI application to fintech, to health, to telcos, to quantum computing. So there were really amazing women that I have the privilege to know. So kudos to all of them. And going forward, again, this is my pragmatic self speaking, but I think there will be, if I look also at the geopolitics of the world in this moment, and we're just at the cusp of Liberation Day that was yesterday announced by Trump. So we are naturally going in potentially in a phase in which the effects of globalization will be slowed down, and so this will definitely impact how innovation or AI will evolve, and it will affect it given the priorities that will sort of shape the path that we take. Having said this, I think a lot of the focus going forward, as I mentioned before, the trends were incremental innovation and addressing the side effects. I call it like that. I think more and more going forward, there will be a focus on addressing the side effects. Cybersecurity will become a big topic. Disinformation is already a big concern. If I think of my children or my nephews, they struggle in distinguishing what is reliable and unreliable information, and they're easily influenced. Now, I work in technology, so I can sort of help them and support them, but many of my friends don't have this knowledge about technology, and they are less able to help the children navigate this new world. And this will be the generation that will be our leaders of tomorrow. And so these issues, I think, will be the most important ones for us to address going forward.
It's so funny. I remember at the turn of the last century, everyone's like, flying cars. Yeah, that's the least of our concerns currently. It's, I
But
did
the
not see a single
robotics,
fly.
you remember?
I don't see a
Yeah,
single flying car of Mobile Congress. I don't hear anybody talking about flying cars. So in some
yeah,
regards, I feel like we've almost like gone beyond even our own imagination.
yeah.
Well, that's really encouraging. Okay, so kind of maybe three top tips. I always like to ask our guests who are, industry experts, what are your top tips to get us to the next century? Just in terms of recapping, what would you say? Top three tips.
So don't be carried away by the trends, but use a critical approach to the hypes. So always ask what the technology is behind it, what it can do for you. So the two questions are always fundamental. So what problems can it solve, or what opportunities can it create? And I think the third one is more as a personal, as a mother, is also think about the personal impacts that all this evolving technology has, and try to accompany and manage it in your daily lives. So these would be the three main issues I would provide.
Well, here's hoping that everybody listens to you. But I'm captivated. If you have any further resources that you want to share, I'm happy to include them in the show notes. Thank you so much. I'm not kidding. This was probably the most interesting, in-depth, and knowledgeable conversation I've had about AI. It was so,
Thank you.
despite
You're
it
so
being
kind.
called hype, this was the anti-hype for the first time. I feel like, oh, I think I get it. So I feel I'm much more assured to know that the hype is not completely upon us, but we should be aware and vigilant about how we're going to dictate it moving forward. So thank you so much, Lucy. I've really
Thank
enjoyed our
you. Thank you,
conversation.
everybody, for listening.
I hope you will be back again and have a wonderful night. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye, everybody. Bye bye.
I want to thank our guest for joining today's episode of GTWN Now, and give a big thank you to our sponsors, CMS Global, for making this episode possible. Today's podcast will be available on our website, gtwn.org, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever else you get your podcasts. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you'll be notified when new episodes drop. I'm your host, Rasali Gitau, GTWN International Board Member, wishing you a week of wonder.